It happened less than 8 months ago. 3 emails, just 3 emails, and he lost everything. Before you judge me, let me tell you how one powerful man turned an office into hell. And why I had to do what I did. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. I still remember the weight of my finger hovering over the send button, knowing that once I clicked it, there would be no going back. But after 2 years of systematic psychological torture, after watching him destroy careers and lives with a smile, I realized sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to let them devour themselves. My name is Lauren Whitmore, and until 8 months ago, I was just another face in the gleaming glass towers of Econexus, one of Austin's fastest-growing tech companies. At 32, I'd worked my way up from junior copywriter to senior marketing specialist, earning respect from colleagues who appreciated my knack for turning complex tech jargon into stories that actually made people care. I loved my job. Or at least, I used to. The 20th floor of our downtown office was my second home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lady Bird Lake, and on good days, you could see kayakers dotting the water like colorful punctuation marks. My desk sat in the northeast corner of the marketing department, surrounded by a team I'd grown to think of as family. We shared inside jokes about impossible deadlines, celebrated product launches with champagne smuggled past security, and covered for each other when life got messy. Then Graham Keller arrived. I'll never forget that Monday morning in September when our previous director announced his retirement and introduced his replacement. Graham walked into the conference room like he owned not just the space, but everyone in it. 47 years old, with silver streaking his temples in that distinguished way that suggested wisdom rather than age. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, and his eyes, God, his eyes had this way of making you feel simultaneously important and insignificant. I've heard incredible things about this team, he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. I'm looking forward to taking Econexus marketing to heights you've never imagined. Sarah, our content manager, whispered in my ear. He's gorgeous. I remember nodding, caught up in the collective enchantment that seemed to fill the room. Even Marcus, our usually cynical data analyst, appeared impressed. Graham came with an impressive resume, Harvard MBA, stints at Google and Microsoft, a reputation for turning struggling departments into success stories. The C-suite loved him before he'd even started. He spoke their language fluently: synergy, disruption, paradigm shifts. In meetings, he commanded attention effortlessly. His presentations peppered with just enough humor to seem approachable, just enough edge to seem innovative. For the first few weeks, he was everything we'd hoped for. He held one-on-ones with each team member, asking about our goals, our challenges, our visions for the department. When he sat across from me in his office, he'd claimed the corner suite, naturally. I felt heard in a way I hadn't under previous management. Lauren, he said, leaning back in his leather chair, your campaign for the Q2 product launch was brilliant. That tagline, tomorrow's tech, today's touch, it's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of. I left that meeting floating. Finally, someone who recognized my contributions, who saw my potential. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion, staying late to perfect presentations, volunteering for challenging projects, believing that under Graham's leadership, I might finally get the senior manager position I'd been working toward for 3 years. But there were signs, even then, little things I dismissed or rationalized. The way he'd cut off Janet, our veteran project manager, mid-sentence during meetings. How he'd assigned the high-profile projects to the men on the team while giving the women what he called support roles. The jokes that walked the line between inappropriate and plausibly deniable. You know how women are with numbers, he'd said once when questioning my budget projections, getting laughs from some of the guys while the rest of us shifted uncomfortably in our seats. I told myself he was from a different generation, that he'd learn our culture, adapt. I told myself a lot of things in those early days. The truth was, I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe that finally, we had a leader who would recognize and reward talent regardless of gender, who would push us to be better without breaking us down. How wrong I was. Graham Keller wasn't building us up. He was identifying targets. And somehow, without understanding why or how, I had moved to the top of his list. The shift was gradual at first, like watching storm clouds gather on a summer afternoon. By November, 3 months into Graham's reign, I found myself excluded from meetings I'd previously led. My ideas, once praised, were now dismissed with barely concealed condescension. That's an interesting perspective, Lauren, Graham would say, his tone suggesting it was anything but interesting. But I think we need something more sophisticated for this client. He'd then present my exact concept 2 days later as his own, with minor tweaks that somehow made it executive-level thinking. When I tried to point this out privately, he gaslit me with surgical precision. "I'm concerned you're not tracking our conversations accurately," he said, frowning with manufactured worry. "Maybe you should take better notes. I'd hate for confusion to impact your performance review." The isolation campaign began in earnest after I challenged him during a department meeting about diversity in our campaign imagery. He responded by removing me from the Sterling Technologies account, my biggest client, one I'd nurtured for 2 years. "I need someone with thicker skin on Sterling," he announced via email, ceasing the entire team. Lauren seems to take feedback too personally. The feedback he referenced? His suggestion that we use younger, prettier models because sex sells, even in B2B. When I'd pushed back, citing our client's commitment to inclusive representation, he'd laughed and asked if I was on my period or something. But that was Graham, death by 1,000 cuts. Each one deniable, each one designed to make me look oversensitive, incompetent, or both. He weaponized the open office layout, conducting his psychological warfare in full view of colleagues who grew increasingly uncomfortable but remained silent. My inbox became a battlefield. He'd send emails at 11 p.m. with urgent requests due by 8 a.m., then berate me publicly for poor time management when the inevitable rush showed in the work. He'd change project parameters hours before deadlines, then express disappointment at my inability to adapt. Every email was CC'd to HR, building a paper trail of my supposed inadequacy. Lauren's struggling to meet basic expectations, he wrote in one particularly venomous message. "I'm documenting this for her own benefit, to help identify areas for improvement." The panic attack started in December. I'd be sitting at my desk, trying to focus on work, when suddenly my chest would tighten, my hands would shake, and the walls would feel like they were closing in. I started keeping Xanax in my desk drawer, washing it down with cold coffee, telling myself I just needed to push through. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, saw it differently. "What you're describing is workplace abuse," she said during our 3rd session. "This isn't normal management, this is targeted harassment." But what could I do? I documented everything, following her advice. I filed a formal complaint with HR in January, sitting across from Patricia Nguyen, our chief people officer, laying out months of evidence. Patricia listened with practiced sympathy, nodding at all the right moments. "These are serious allegations, Lauren. We take them very seriously. But you have to understand, Graham is new to our culture. Perhaps this is a communication issue." A communication issue. I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. He asked if I was on my period in front of 12 people. He says that was a joke taken out of context. Several team members corroborated that you seemed to be overreacting. Of course they did. Graham had already begun his divide-and-conquer strategy, pulling aside the ambitious ones, promising them my projects, my responsibilities, if they'd just help him deal with the Lauren situation. 2 weeks later, Patricia called me back. The investigation was closed. No policy violations were found. Graham had been coached on communication styles. Case closed. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen, reading and rereading the email. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady with a kind of cold fury I'd never felt before. Graham had won this round, but something Patricia had said stuck with me. "There's no evidence of misconduct." Evidence? That's what I needed. Real evidence, not just my word against his. I minimized the HR email and opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Receipts. Then I began planning. If the system wouldn't protect me, if the proper channels were dead ends designed to protect men like Graham, then maybe it was time to forge my own path. I thought about all the nights I'd cried in my car, all the therapy sessions, all the Xanax that barely kept me functional. I thought about Janet, who'd transferred departments rather than deal with him, about Amy from accounting, who'd quit without another job lined up. No more. Graham Keller had made a mistake. He'd pushed me past my breaking point, past my fear, past my willingness to play by rules that were rigged against me. He thought he'd broken me. Instead, he'd created something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday in February. I'd stayed late, again, reworking a presentation Graham had gutted hours before it was due. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew and the hum of servers in the distance. That's when I heard his voice echoing from the corner office. No, the contract needs to route through my personal LLC, not Econexus, Graham was saying. Same deliverables, but I'll handle the execution privately. I froze. Through the crack under his door, I could see he was on speakerphone, feet up on his desk. Every instinct told me to leave, but something made me pull out my phone and hit record. The non-compete, the voice on the speaker asked. Won't Econexus Legal have issues with you consulting for Meridian? Meridian, our biggest competitor. Graham laughed. What they don't know won't hurt them. I've been feeding them our product roadmap for months. Another few contracts and I'll have enough to start my own firm. These idiots are practically funding their own competition. My hands trembled as I held the phone steady, capturing every damning word. 20 minutes of Graham detailing his side deals, his stolen intellectual property, his plans to poach our best clients. When he finally hung up, I slipped away silently, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the whole building could hear it. That night, I became a detective. Using my marketing skills for reconnaissance, I dug through every public record, every LinkedIn connection, every digital breadcrumb Graham had left. What I found was staggering. 3 separate LLCs registered in Delaware, contracts with 4 Econexus competitors, email threads on his company account. The idiot had actually used his work email, negotiating deals that violated not just his non-compete, but potentially several federal trade laws. You can't use this, Dr. Martinez warned during our next session. Accessing his email without permission. I didn't access anything, I said carefully. He left his computer unlocked in a conference room. I was looking for my presentation notes. It was partially true. Graham's arrogance was his weakness. He'd grown so comfortable in his power that he'd gotten sloppy, leaving browsers open, printing sensitive documents and forgetting them in the shared printer, conducting illegal business on company property. I spent weeks gathering evidence, each piece more damning than the last. Screenshots, recordings, forwarded emails from sympathetic colleagues who'd witnessed his behavior but were too scared to speak up. The folder on my laptop grew thick with proof. But it wasn't enough to just have evidence. I'd learned that lesson with HR. The truth alone doesn't guarantee justice, not when you're fighting someone with connections, charm, and a penis in corporate America. No, I needed something more. I needed strategy. The plan began to form during a particularly brutal team meeting where Graham had reduced our newest hire, Priya, to tears over a minor typo in a client email. This is why I prefer not to hire people fresh out of college, he'd said, looking directly at me as if I'd been responsible for her hiring. Especially diversity hires. They're just not ready for the real world. That night, I created 3 separate email accounts using VPNs and careful digital hygiene. Each one had a purpose, a voice, a role to play in what was coming. The first, a concerned journalist investigating workplace culture in tech. Professional, persistent, asking the right questions. The second, an anonymous Econexus employee, terrified but moral. unable to stay silent any longer. The third, a potential client who'd been approached by Graham for off-the-books work and felt uncomfortable with the ethical implications. I spent hours crafting each identity, making sure the language was distinct, the concerns legitimate, the evidence carefully parceled out. This wasn't about revenge anymore, or not just about revenge. This was about justice, served cold and precisely. My colleagues started noticing changes in me. The panic attacks had stopped. I no longer flinched when Graham entered a room. When he berated me in meetings, I took notes calmly, professionally, letting him dig his own grave with every sexist comment, every stolen idea, every policy violation. "You seem different," Sarah mentioned one day at lunch. "More confident?" I smiled, stirring my coffee, just focusing on what I can control. If only she knew, I was no longer a victim in Graham's psychological warfare. I was a soldier, armed with truth and a plan. Every insult, every humiliation was just more ammunition. Graham, oblivious to the danger, escalated his campaign against me. He moved my desk to the spot by the bathrooms. He accidentally left me off important emails. He scheduled mandatory meetings during my pre-approved vacation days. "I hope you're not planning to let your team down," he'd said when I reminded him about my time off. "That wouldn't look good on your review." I canceled the vacation. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to be here when it all came crashing down. I wanted to see his face when he realized that his victim had become his executioner. The evidence was ready. The emails were drafted. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment to strike, and I knew exactly when that would be: quarterly earnings week, when Econex's executives would be hypersensitive to anything that might affect stock prices or investor confidence. Graham thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. Quarterly earnings week arrived with the usual chaos. Executives huddled in conference rooms, PR teams on high alert, everyone desperate to present Econexis as the unstoppable tech titan investors expected. It was perfect. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. Each email was drafted, refined, scheduled, 3 digital bullets, each aimed at a different vital organ of Graham's carefully constructed career. The first email would go to the board of directors and C-suite at 6 a.m. Monday, sent from the anonymous employee account. I kept it clinical, factual, almost apologetic in tone. "I am reaching out with deep concern about ethical violations within the marketing department. I have struggled with whether to come forward, but my conscience demands action. Attached you will find evidence of Director Graham Keller's unauthorized contracts with competing firms, including Meridian Technologies." I attached carefully selected evidence, enough to demand immediate investigation, not so much that they could claim I'd violated privacy laws. The LLC registrations were public record. The contract details came from documents Graham had carelessly left on the shared printer. The recorded conversation was described but not included, bait for them to investigate further. The second email was crafted for Amy Zhao, the tech reporter at Austin Business Journal who'd written extensively about toxic workplace culture in tech. This one came from my journalist account, scheduled for Monday at 2 p.m. "Ms. Zhao, I've been investigating patterns of harassment and financial misconduct at several Austin tech firms. A source has provided compelling evidence about Graham Keller at Econexis. Given your recent series on workplace abuse, I thought you might be interested. I have recordings and documentation of systematic harassment targeting female employees, as well as evidence of corporate espionage." I knew Amy's reputation: thorough, relentless, and particularly passionate about exposing men who used power to abuse women in tech. She'd verify everything before publishing, which is why I made sure every claim could be independently confirmed. The third email was the masterpiece, from the concerned client account. It would go to Econexis's biggest investors and key clients at 4 p.m. Monday. Professional, worried, just the right tone of corporate concern. "Dear partners, I was recently approached by Graham Keller of Econexis regarding private consulting arrangements that seem to conflict with our existing contracts. When I expressed concerns about non-compete agreements, Mr. Keller suggested ways to circumvent standard corporate channels. This raised serious questions about intellectual property protection and corporate governance at Econexus. I felt obligated to bring this to your attention. Each email was designed to trigger a different response mechanism. The board would launch an internal investigation. The journalist would start making calls, verifying facts. The investors would demand answers. 3 pressure points, all activated within 10 hours. I spent Sunday night in my apartment, triple-checking everything. VPN active. Emails scheduled through delayed send services. Digital footprints carefully obscured. My laptop was clean. All evidence backed up on encrypted drives hidden in my apartment. If they searched my work computer, they'd find nothing but exemplary marketing work. At 11:47 p.m., I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, finger hovering over the button that would schedule the first email. This was it. Once I clicked send, there was no going back. Graham would be destroyed, but I'd be forever changed too. You can't orchestrate someone's downfall and remain untouched by it. I thought about all the women before me who'd suffered in silence. Janet, who still flinched when she saw Graham in the hallways. Amy from accounting, who'd left tech entirely. Priya, brilliant and eager, already showing signs of the same anxiety that had consumed me. I thought about the proper channels I'd tried. HR's polite dismissal, Patricia's practiced sympathy that changed nothing, the system that protected predators while gaslighting their victims. I thought about Dr. Martinez asking me, "What would justice look like to you?" This is what justice looked like. Not the clean, institutional kind where reports are filed and policies are updated. The messy, personal kind where someone who thought they were untouchable finally faces consequences. I clicked send on the first email, then the second, then the third. The wine tasted like victory and vinegar. I'd either freed myself or destroyed myself, possibly both. But at least I'd acted. At least I'd fought back. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at my usual time, grande latte in hand, wearing my best blazer. If this was going to be a bloodbath, I'd be dressed for it. I passed Graham's office. He was already there, probably sending his own morning volleys of abuse to unsuspecting targets. Enjoy it, I thought. It's the last normal morning you'll ever have. I sat at my desk by the bathrooms, opened my laptop, and began working on the Phoenix campaign. Just another Monday for Lauren Whitmore, model employee. The first email would have landed 20 minutes ago. The executive floor was probably already in crisis mode. Sarah appeared at my desk around 8:30, eyes wide. "Did you see the all-hands meeting invite? Emergency session at 9 a.m. That never happens during earnings week." I kept my face neutral, concerned, but not too concerned. "Technical issue maybe, security breach?" "Maybe," she said. But her voice suggested she suspected something bigger. At 8:47, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, probably Amy Zhao, following up on the journalist email. I let it go to voicemail. Lauren Whitmore had no idea what was happening. Lauren Whitmore was just trying to survive another Monday. But the other me, the one who'd spent months planning this moment, she was counting down the minutes until Graham Keller's world exploded. The all-hands meeting was electric with tension. 200 employees crammed into the main conference hall. Whispers rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. I chose a seat in the middle, invisible among the masses. Just another concerned employee. CEO David Chen took the podium. His usual earnings week smile replaced by something harder. "I'll be direct. This morning, serious allegations were brought to our attention regarding ethical violations within our organization, effective immediately. Graham Keller has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a few poorly suppressed smiles from Graham's victims. I kept my expression carefully neutral, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "I want to be clear," David continued. "Econexus has zero tolerance for behavior that violates our values or the law. We will investigate thoroughly and transparently. If you have information relevant to this investigation, please contact HR or our anonymous ethics hotline. By lunch, Austin Business Journal had broken the story. Amy Zhao's article was devastating in its precision. Sources allege pattern of harassment, corporate espionage at Austin tech giant. She'd done her homework, corroborating the anonymous tips with interviews from former employees, public records, and somehow a statement from Meridian Technologies confirming they'd been approached inappropriately. I read the article in a bathroom stall, allowing myself exactly 3 minutes of savage satisfaction before returning to my desk, with a troubled expression appropriate for the circumstances. The marketing department was in chaos. Graham's office had been sealed off, security guards posted at the door. Personnel carried out his computer equipment in labeled boxes. Everyone had theories, but those of us who'd been his targets exchanged knowing glances. I heard it was embezzlement, Marcus whispered during an impromptu coffee run. Sexual harassment, Sarah countered. Did you see how many women from other departments they're interviewing? Why not both? Priya said quietly, and we all turned to look at her. She straightened her shoulders. I mean, men like that. They usually aren't just one kind of awful. By Wednesday, Graham tried to fight back. His lawyer released a statement claiming he was the victim of a coordinated smear campaign by a disgruntled employee seeking attention. He demanded to face his accusers, threatened defamation suits, played every card in the wrongfully accused playbook. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The forensic IT team found the email chains on his work computer. The LLCs were undeniable. 3 more women came forward with harassment complaints, emboldened by the public attention. Then Meridian, facing their own PR nightmare, released a full statement detailing Graham's approaches and the proprietary Econexus information he'd offered to sell. The death blow came Thursday afternoon. Someone, definitely not me. I was in a meeting, leaked Graham's infamous diversity hire rant to an intern at TechCrunch. The audio went viral within hours. Graham Gate started trending. Econexus stock dipped 2 points. I was refilling my coffee when Patricia from HR appeared at my elbow. My blood froze. Lauren, she said, and I searched her face for suspicion, finding only exhaustion. I owe you an apology. When you came to me in January, I should have listened better. I'm sorry. I gripped my mug carefully. You were doing your job as you understood it. No, she said firmly. I was protecting the wrong people. That ends now. We're implementing new policies, bringing in external consultants. Would you consider being part of the task force to reshape our workplace culture? The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. They wanted me to help fix the system I'd had to burn down to get their attention. I'll think about it, I managed. Friday morning, 2 weeks after those 3 emails, Graham Keller was officially terminated. The board's statement was clinical. Following a thorough investigation, we have found evidence of gross misconduct, violation of company policies, and potential criminal activity. Mr. Keller's employment has been terminated effective immediately. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement and regulatory authorities. Law enforcement, I hadn't expected that. But apparently, corporate espionage and attempted sale of trade secrets crossed lines even I hadn't realized. The news coverage was relentless. Graham's photo, that confident, silver-templed headshot, appeared under headlines about toxic workplace culture, corporate corruption, the Me Too movement in tech. Former colleagues from Google and Microsoft suddenly remembered concerns they'd had. His wife filed for divorce by the end of the week. Monday morning, 3 weeks after it all began, I arrived early to find a crowd gathered in the parking lot. Graham was there, supervised by security, loading personal items into his Tesla. Someone had alerted the media. News vans lined the street. He looked smaller somehow. The silver hair seemed dull. The confident posture deflated. He loaded a box of awards and framed degrees. The detritus of a career built on other people's broken dreams. Our eyes met across the parking lot. For one terrifying moment, I thought he knew. Something flickered in his expression, not recognition exactly, but a kind of primal awareness that I was connected to his downfall. Then he looked away, got in his car, and drove out of our lives forever. The office felt different without Graham's toxic presence. Lighter, like someone had opened windows in a room that had been sealed for years. People smiled more, spoke up in meetings, shared ideas without fear of theft or ridicule. But his ghost lingered in policies unchanged, in the trauma carried by those he'd targeted, in the knowledge that it had taken nuclear options to remove one predator from one company. They gave me the promotion I'd deserved for years, along with a substantial raise, in recognition of your contributions during a difficult time. I accepted it without comment, without joy. It was blood money, paid far too late. The story wasn't over. Of course, there would be lawsuits, investigations, think pieces about corporate accountability. Graham would probably reinvent himself eventually. Men like him always did. But for now, he was finished in Austin Tech. Word traveled fast in our incestuous industry. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd become as ruthless as him. If, in destroying the monster, I'd absorbed some of his poison. Dr. Martinez assured me this was normal, that questioning our actions was what separated us from people like Graham. You didn't create those emails from nothing, she reminded me. You simply revealed what was already there. Still, I knew I'd crossed a line. There was before the emails and after. And no going back to the woman who believed in proper channels and institutional justice. But when Priya stopped by my desk, eyes bright with plans for a campaign Graham would have killed. When Janet asked to return to our department now that it was safe, when the new director actually listened in meetings, I felt something that might have been peace, not happiness, not vindication. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, when the system fails, we have to become the system ourselves. The final act began on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after Graham's termination. I was reviewing campaign metrics when my phone buzzed with a Google alert I'd set up. Graham Keller plus lawsuit plus Econexus. My stomach dropped. But when I clicked the link, I nearly laughed out loud. Graham wasn't suing Econexus. They were suing him. Criminal charges for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, fraud. The FBI was involved. Federal prosecutors were seeking damages in the millions. The internet exploded. Graham Gate returned with vengeance. Reddit detectives dug up every questionable deal from his past. LinkedIn became a graveyard of former connections distancing themselves. His carefully curated online presence crumbled like wet cardboard. Amy Zhao published a follow-up investigation that was Pulitzer-worthy in its scope. She'd found patterns going back 15 years. Companies Graham had left under clouds of suspicion. NDAs that hid darker truths. A trail of destroyed careers that exclusively belonged to women and minorities. Jesus, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder in the break room. He was like a serial killer, but for careers. The comparison was apt. Graham had refined his methods over decades, learning exactly how to push boundaries without crossing legal lines, until his arrogance at Econexus finally caught up with him. More victims emerged from the shadows. A black engineer from Microsoft who'd been driven out after reporting Graham. An Asian marketing director from a startup who'd filed a complaint that mysteriously disappeared. Story after story of systematic abuse that HR departments had buried to protect their golden boy. The class action lawsuit came next. 17 women across multiple companies seeking damages for career destruction, emotional distress, and lost wages. Their lawyer, a fierce woman named Denise Washington, who specialized in taking down corporate predators, held a press conference that made national news. Graham Keller represents everything wrong with corporate America, she declared, flanked by clients whose faces I recognized from LinkedIn, from conferences, from the sisterhood of women in tech who'd learned to warn each other in whispers. He weaponized power structures designed to protect people like him. Today, we fight back. I watched from my couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the Texas heat, feeling strangely disconnected from the avalanche I'd triggered. These women were brave, stepping into the spotlight I'd avoided. Part of me wanted to join them, to stand up and declare my role in his downfall. But I didn't. Lauren Whitmore remained the helpful colleague who'd survived Graham's reign through luck and resilience. Nobody connected the anonymous emails to the quiet marketing specialist who'd been promoted in the aftermath. The criminal trial was set for fall. Graham's assets were frozen. His wife's divorce lawyer, another shark who smelled blood in the water, revealed hidden accounts, property purchased with embezzled funds, a lifestyle built on stolen ideas and crushed dreams. Then came the documentary announcement. Netflix was producing a limited series about toxic leadership in tech, with Graham as the centerpiece villain. A-list actors were already attached. His infamy would be immortalized, streaming in millions of homes. I saw him once more, purely by accident. I was at Whole Foods on a Saturday afternoon, debating between 2 bottles of wine, when I noticed a commotion by the prepared foods section. Security was escorting someone out, a disheveled man who'd apparently tried to shoplift a sandwich. It was Graham. Gone were the tailored suits and confident swagger. He wore wrinkled khakis and a faded polo, shoulders hunched like a beaten dog. His hair had gone completely gray in mere months. When he turned, our eyes met for the second time since his downfall. This time, there was no flash of suspicion, just hollow defeat. He looked through me like I was furniture, another witness to his humiliation. Security marched him past, and I heard him mumbling about lawyers, about appeals, about injustice. I bought both bottles of wine. The final blow came via a Times investigative piece published on a Wednesday morning. They'd found more offshore accounts, connections to other corporate espionage cases, evidence suggesting Graham had been selling secrets for years. The FBI expanded their investigation. Tech companies across Silicon Valley quietly audited employees who'd worked with him. His name became synonymous with corporate corruption. Business schools added his case to ethics courses as a cautionary tale. Pulling a Keller entered tech slang as shorthand for spectacular self-destruction through hubris. The women he'd tormented were finding their voices, their power. Priya had launched a mentorship program for young women in tech. Janet was promoted to department head. Others were speaking at conferences, writing articles, turning their trauma into fuel for change. But the system that created and protected Graham still existed. For every predator exposed, 10 more operated in shadows. For every woman who found justice, dozens suffered in silence. The work wasn't done, might never be done. Still, when I walked through Econexus's halls, I noticed differences. Men interrupted less in meetings. HR took complaints seriously. The Whisper network that had warned women about Graham now shared opportunities, lifted each other up instead of just trying to survive. It wasn't enough. It was everything. On the anniversary of those 3 emails, I deleted the encrypted drives. The evidence had served its purpose. Graham Keller was finished, awaiting trial. Abandoned by everyone who'd once courted his favor. His name a cautionary tale whispered in business schools and boardrooms. I'd won. We'd all won. So why did victory taste like ash? Because justice isn't clean. Because becoming the monster's executioner leaves marks on your soul. Because the system that required such extreme measures to protect its victims remained fundamentally unchanged. But when Priya knocked on my door with eyes bright with a new idea, when I saw women in our industry walking a little taller, when predators thought twice before targeting their next victim, I knew I'd do it again. Graham Keller had taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. Sometimes the only way to fight a monster is to become something equally ruthless, equally calculating. The difference was in what you did with that power. He'd used his to destroy. I'd used mine to reveal. The Econexus offices feel different now, not just because of the new leadership or updated policies, but because the fear is gone. That suffocating dread that used to greet me every morning has evaporated like morning mist under Texas sun. I still sit at my desk, not by the bathrooms anymore, but in the corner office that should have been mine years ago. The view of Lady Bird Lake stretches out before me, kayakers still dotting the water like punctuation marks. Sometimes I catch myself looking for Graham's reflection in the glass, but he's gone. Really, truly gone. The trial ended last month. Guilty on all counts. 7 years federal prison, millions in restitution. Lifetime ban from serving as a corporate officer. The documentary premiered the same week. I didn't watch it. But Priya said they portrayed him as even worse than reality, which was quite an achievement. His name has become a verb in our industry. Don't pull a Keller, people say when someone's ego starts outpacing their ethics. Business schools teach his case as a masterclass in how power corrupts and how hubris destroys. He wanted to be remembered. He got his wish. But I don't think about Graham much anymore. I think about the others, the women who came forward, the ones who didn't, the future victims saved by his spectacular fall. I think about the system we're slowly changing, one policy at a time, one conversation at a time. Patricia from HR, now Chief People Officer Patricia, with real power to make change, stops by my office occasionally. We're developing new frameworks for reporting harassment, for protecting whistleblowers, for ensuring no one needs to go to the extremes I did. You know, she said last week, we received 3 harassment complaints this month through the new channels, all investigated properly, all resolved without anyone having to suffer in silence. 3 women who didn't have to document abuse for months. 3 women who didn't need therapists to prescribe Xanax. 3 women who wouldn't have to choose between their careers and their dignity. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. Sometimes, late at night when the office is empty and I'm working on campaigns that actually matter now, I think about those 3 emails. Such simple things, words on a screen, sent into the digital void, David facing Goliath with a Gmail account instead of a slingshot. I've never told anyone. Not Dr. Martinez, though she probably suspects. Not Sarah or Priya, though they sometimes look at me with knowing glances. The secret sits in my chest like a small, hot stone. Some days it feels like pride. Others, like guilt. Most days, it's just a fact. I did what needed to be done. The young women joining our team now have no idea what it was like before. They speak up in meetings without fear, pitch bold ideas without worrying about theft, exist in their careers without the constant vigilance we learn to wear like armor. They don't know about Graham Keller except as a cautionary tale, a boogeyman from corporate folklore. Good. That's how it should be. They shouldn't have to know. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. My heart still skips when that happens, some primitive part of my brain expecting consequences that never came. But it's just a recruiter, asking if I'm interested in a VP position at another firm. I delete it. I'm not going anywhere. This is my territory now. Reclaimed and reformed. The sun sets over Austin, painting the sky in shades of victory and vengeance. Tomorrow there will be new challenges, new battles to fight. But they'll be fought in daylight now, with witnesses and support systems and the knowledge that predators can fall. I close my laptop, gather my things, head for the elevator. In the lobby, the security guard nods, the same one who escorted Graham out that final morning. We don't speak, but understanding passes between us. Some of us know. Some of us remember. Some of us made sure. The parking lot where Graham loaded his boxes of shame is just asphalt and painted lines now. No ghosts linger here. I've reclaimed this space too, along with everything else he tried to steal. 3 emails. That's all it took to bring down a man who thought he was untouchable. Not because I was particularly brave or clever, but because his own corruption was so deep that all I had to do was shine a light on it. He destroyed himself. I just provided the match. I drive home through Austin traffic, NPR discussing workplace reform on the radio. My phone sits silent on the passenger seat. No more late-night panic attacks. No more prescription bottles rattling in my purse. Just a woman who learned that sometimes the system fails, and when it does, we have to become the justice we seek. The secret will die with me. Lauren Whitmore will be remembered, if at all, as a good marketer who survived a bad boss. The woman who sent those emails, she exists only in encrypted memories and the digital void where deleted files go to die. But Graham Keller, his destruction will echo for decades. A warning to every predator who thinks power makes them untouchable. A reminder that in the digital age, secrets have a way of finding the light. 3 emails, and he exposed himself. Sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply handing someone the rope and watching them fashion their own noose. I didn't destroy Graham Keller. I just made sure everyone saw what he really was. And that, I think, as I pull into my driveway, is a story worth keeping to myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever dealt with a toxic boss? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.